Good evening. I'd like to thank everybody for taking time out of your busy schedules to come to this presentation, Faces of Recovery. It's the opiate crisis has devastated small communities, large communities from coast to coast, and Brattleboro we're not immune. It's having a devastating effect on our community. It is tearing apart families, and we see the ugliness of it every single day when we go downtown. If you've heard me speak before in the past, you have heard me say time and time again that this is a multifaceted approach that we have to take to combat this crisis. Okay, law enforcement certainly is a component in there, but there's also much more other organizations in the communities. We all have to band together to battle this crisis. We are making progress. There is hope. And I don't want to paint a doom and gloom picture, but we are working and we're moving forward. Don't mistake, we still have tons of work to do, a lot of work to do. But we're not going to give up. We're going to continue to move on and on. Tonight, what you're going to see is something that I think that has been lacking in a lot of talk in dealing with the opiate crisis is some of the success stories. There are success stories out there. There's quite a few success stories out there, but nobody talks about that. Even from a law enforcement perspective, when there is a success story and we are no longer dealing with that individual, we think they're either incarcerated or they're dead. Not too often do we say, wow, maybe they went into a medical facility, they got better, and they moved on, they got out of this community, and they're doing very, very well. They might even still be in this community, but we won't be dealing with them like we used to be, because they won't be on the street corners. They won't be in the drug houses that we're banging at 2, 3 in the morning. We just don't see them no more. So this is a story of success, and I really want to start promoting within this community a lot of stories of success. There are many, many paths and roads to recovery. Not one cookie cutter method fits all. Everyone is very, very unique. And we're going to hear of a unique story tonight. And it's going to be presented by the U.S. Attorney, Christina Nolan, and Justin Goulet, who is the star of the film. So I'm sure you'll be available afterwards for pictures and autographs and things of that nature. Okay? But I've seen it. It's a short film. It's very powerful. But it's great to bring Christina and Justin in here to sit down and talk about how this success story happened. And it's a great story, and it needs to be told. We do have some pamphlets in the back of the room after the presentation. On your way out, if you would like some things, please help yourself. And if you have any questions or concerns, we'll be available after the presentation to hopefully have a nice open dialogue about this. With that being said, I would like to introduce the U.S. Attorney, Christina Nolan.
Thank you, Gunny. No, you don't have to clap. It's okay. So while Justin's signing autographs tonight, I'm going to be in bed. I'm an early to bedder. I want to thank you all for coming tonight. It's this attendance is heartwarming, and we're honored that you're here. And I think you're going to be glad you came, because we are here tonight with a message of hope. A message of hope in this drug crisis, a message of hope in this opioid crisis. And this is a message that Vermont and the whole nation needs to hear. And the message is in this man, Justin Goulet, my friend. It is embodied in him. And I am going to let him speak. I want to give a few words first, but he really is the story. He really is the message. Just to give you a little background about this project, as Gunny said, I should start by introducing myself, I guess. I am Christina Nolan, last I checked. I am the U.S. Attorney for Vermont. Honor and a privilege to hold this position. I've been the U.S. Attorney since November of 2017. As U.S. Attorney, I am privileged to be involved and lead all of our efforts to enforce the drug laws and bring consequences to people who are trafficking drugs in our communities for profit and profiting from addiction. enforcing the laws, taking these people out of communities, bringing them consequences, that's very important. It's a huge part of what I do. But when I took on the job and when I was interviewing for the job, it was always very important for me to be involved in and hopefully to even help to lead our prevention efforts, because you can't arrest your way out of this problem. Okay, it's cliche, everybody says it, but it's darn true. You cannot arrest your way out of this problem. And the surest way, actually, to win the win the fight and to make headway in this drug crisis would be to convince every young Vermonter not to take the first risk, not to try drugs for the first time. That would be the surest way. And everybody who knows me knows I have a passion for children. They are the most innocent and vulnerable members of our society, and we have to get to them before the drugs do. We have to get to them before the drugs do, and that's a big motivating part of this project. You know, I think children are our future, and when we look at them, we should have hope. And I'm here with a man who should give us all hope, and that is Justin. And Justin and I met under unusual circumstances. When I was an assistant U.S. attorney, before I became U.S. attorney, I prosecuted Justin for trafficking drugs and gun offenses arising from his raging opioid addiction. That was the motivating factor behind his offense. Justin immediately accepted responsibility for his crimes, and he's gone on to make an incredible life turnaround. He's more than 3 years sober, and I'm going to let him speak to that, and we'll speak about it further tonight. So Justin is one of actually several former defendants of mine who I prosecuted, whose offenses arose out of addiction, who have reached out to me when their cases were over to thank me for what they perceived as fair treatment, and also to tell me that accountability played a crucial role in their recovery. And I can't tell you what it means to me to have heard from these people. It's just a privilege, and it has meant the world to me. Justin has actually reached out. He never stopped reaching out after his case was over, and he offered repeatedly, both before I was U.S. Attorney and after I was U.S. Attorney, to help with the drug crisis, which is just such an honor to have him reaching out that way. But anyways, we took him up on it. We got wise and took him up on it. And we partnered with him to make this documentary. It's about 9.5 minutes, and also a public service announcement about his life and his story. Make sure I'm not missing any of the points I wanted to share with you. So we took him up on it. Just real quick, the documentary is going to speak for itself, but here's what I see as the messages of the documentary. The first is hope, okay? Young people, people of all ages, don't use. It's not worth losing your life, derailing your life, and all your hopes and dreams can be taken from you by addiction. So don't use. But if you know somebody who's using, or if you yourself are already using, you of any age, there is hope and there is help. Justin is living proof of this. He's living proof of it. He is proof beyond a reasonable doubt, as prosecutors say. That's our standard of proof. This is proof beyond a reasonable doubt, okay? It can happen. It can happen. You can go into recovery and you can get a whole different life. So that's the first message, is hope. We don't talk about hope enough. We don't. There's a lot of doom and gloom, and I understand why, but we need to also see positive and talk about positive. The second message of the documentary is law enforcement is on your side. As U.S. Attorney, my dream would be never to have to prosecute another drug case. And if every story ended like Justin's, we would defeat the evil that is drug trafficking and the horror that is addiction once and for all, because there'd be no market to sell your drugs if everybody's story ended like Justin's. So we are on the side of the person, law enforcement is, who's struggling with substance use disorder, and we are on the side of the treatment. We stand with the treatment and prevention communities because we all have the same goal, which is to get people into freedom from drugs. And so it's a message of law enforcement solidarity with those communities and also the people who are struggling. I've already talked too long, but the last thing I'll say is, as U.S. Attorney and when I was applying for the job, I've been asked in both contexts, what is your proudest case? And I do have some proud cases where I got what I thought was a just and 20, 25-year sentence. But I also talked about Justin's case as my proudest case. So as a prosecutor, we have a solemn obligation to take every individual case on its facts and treat every defendant based on their unique circumstances. There's no one-size-fits-all approach to prosecuting. It just isn't. Justin had a raging addiction, no criminal record. He needed accountability, yes. I think he would agree with that. But he also needed treatment and support, not a long jail sentence. And so, you know, in closing, I'll just say, and we're going to talk more, I'm going to give you a chance to dialogue with us after this video, but I'll say that you asked about my proudest case. Well, let's talk about the proudest thing in my life. And that is knowing this man, calling him a friend, and having this opportunity to work with him. So, before I go all sloppy on you, I want to turn it over to Justin.
I will be brief. This is nice for me. We do most of these up in Burlington. I live right across the river, so it's a short drive. You know, I think talking about this project, first of all, I've got a lot of connections with this town. I grew up right up 91 in White River Junction, so you know, I've got a lot of good memories in this town, playing high school football under the lights where we usually stomped Brattleboro, I'll say that. But I've got a lot of bad memories too, because, you know, since I got out of a long-term treatment in Dublin, you know, I still struggled. And, you know, there's a lot of people here that have said some really nice things about me, but I honestly say I take responsibility for my recovery, but I don't take credit for it. I got involved in 12-step recovery, and the most important thing that people showed me how to do was to get out of my own way. They showed me a process that I have followed one day at a time, the last almost 4 years now, and when I've been doing that, my life has been great. So I'm no hero. There's tons of wonderful stories of recovery everywhere. It's just that a lot of people choose to be anonymous, and I throw my anonymity out the window because I kind of had to explain some things when I first started over. But you know, it's simple. I had some wonderful people show me how to live my life a different way, and I have done that every day, one day at a time. And since I've done that, my life has been a heck of a lot better. But people always ask me, what was it? I said, I just sat down, I shut my mouth, I opened my ears, and I learned how to do it right. So the video will speak for itself, and thanks a lot for everybody coming, and thanks for everybody for the kind words you said. Thanks. People have a view of what they think a heroin addict is. I mean, they think it's a guy curled up behind a dumpster with a needle hanging out of their arm. And most of the time when I tell people that I'm a recovering heroin addict, they don't believe me. You can't go from being a collegiate strength coach to working in a rinky-dink gym and not have an answer of why. I don't want to have to hide things from people. At least now that it's out there, I can deal with the stigma on my own terms. The warning signs were there at an early age. My friends used to call me the cauldron. They'd say, look out, there's a whole bunch of stuff going in the cauldron tonight, and I'd stay away from him. And then when I was 23, I was attempting my last squat in a powerlifting meet, and I lost my balance, and the bar rolled right over my head. It kind of bent me right in half. I ruptured 3 discs in my lumbar spine. Eventually, I convinced the doctor to throw the oxy at me. Things really spun out of control. I just ended up getting involved with some people that I shouldn't have been involved with. Fronting people money or doing people favors, renting people cars, all geared toward getting my drugs at a cheaper price. I'd be so miserable that I had to use to deal with that sickness that was inside of me.
I feel very lucky to have been born in Vermont. Growing up here and getting acclimated in a place where people are independent thinkers and problem solvers, I think it can be helpful when you're trying to solve larger criminal justice problems. I will support and defend
the Constitution.
the Constitution.
38-year-old Christina Nolan took the oath of office today and outlined a range of priorities she'll bring to bear as Vermont's top federal prosecutor.
How has Vermont's drug problem evolved?
I think we saw it start with pills, and then when there was a reconfiguration of the pill formula, folks turned to heroin because it was cheaper. I want addicts to stop using, and I think it's going to be a combination of enforcement, treatment, and prevention. But if we normalize heroin use, then I think we're giving up, and I'm not ready to give up. This is an enormously important job, and I would feel pressure doing it anywhere, and there would be something wrong with me if I didn't feel the pressure and the weight of the responsibility. When you meet people like I've met in prosecuting cases, and you see that they have recovered from addiction, terrible addictions, addictions that were fueling their every action every day. Don't tell me that we can't make any difference or that people are always going to use, because it's not true.
Jail and prison are what you make of it. The only way I can explain that to somebody that hasn't been locked up is just time stops. Everybody outside is living their life and moving on and having birthdays and doing whatever it is that they do, and your time just stops. It was certainly a moment where I had to take a look around and say, boy, you know, who put me here? And it was me. You know, it wasn't the judge, it wasn't the PO, it wasn't the other people in my case, it wasn't my family, it was me. There's this moment where, you know, the door shuts behind you, and I always do this. You know, the door shuts behind you, and, you know, you think it's over, you know. Now that I look back, my life has turned out to be a heck of a lot better than I thought it was going to be when that door shut.
I think it's important for law enforcement and people like U.S. attorneys to stand with recovering addicts, even people they've prosecuted. I mean, that's a very unique position he and I have been in. He does have a felony conviction because I made the very solemn decision to decide to charge him with a felony. He accepted responsibility. But even though we've had to stand on opposite sides of the aisle, literally, we came together, we bridged that gap, because going forward, we know that we want everybody to find the kind of recovery, the freedom from addiction that Justin has. I know that the more people we can inspire down that path, the more likely we are to win this battle. You never know when Justin's going to write to you. So he has written to me sort of randomly off and on, and I love it. I love getting updates from him. So it's entitled 3 Years. It says, "Good morning, Christina. Today is a special day for me. 3 years sober. I know that I've told you this before, but I honestly feel like I would not be here today had I not met you. Thank you for holding me accountable when I needed it, and for giving me a chance when I felt like I didn't deserve one. I am grateful for all of the difficulties that I have faced in my life, including my arrest. Those events have truly shaped me into a better human being. I am kinder, more understanding, and capable of empathy, having passed through some pain. I value every opportunity today to help those that are struggling, hoping that it will make a difference in fighting this epidemic. I appreciate your camaraderie and friendship in the effort to make this world a better place. I look forward to seeing you, Justin Goulet. P.S. I rewarded myself by purchasing a muscle car. It will give me something to look forward to this spring. I may need some help getting out of some speeding tickets. Just kidding. All the best to you and your family." So that's the email. It's pretty special, actually. You had no criminal record.
No criminal record.
No exposure to the justice
No
system.
exposure to the justice system other than...
And you find yourself in federal court.
Yeah, I don't think I really understood the ramifications of it until I sat in that little room with my lawyer, and he came in and said, "Boy, you got some bad stuff here." And I said, "So what's that mean? I'm gonna do like a couple weeks?" You know, but I think there's some comfort in knowing I had done what I had done, and
Yep.
you know, there's a price to pay for your actions when you do that stuff.
I was so struck by we met almost immediately because you immediately accepted responsibility.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh my God, I see such a big heart, such a smart guy, and such a genuine guy in there. And that was, you know, really early in your process, too.
Yeah,
There's so much cynicism in this opioid crisis.
Yeah.
There's so much doom and gloom.
Yeah.
I reject that because we're alive, we can make a difference.
Yeah. There has to be a balance of accountability and giving people second chances, and there have to be options available for people. I mean, one of the most amazing things that happened to me is that I was able to go right into a long-term treatment facility. So I got, 9 months of behavioral modification. There's just not enough of those long-term treatment centers around. Going to a 28-day rehab is honestly not enough time for someone to develop the skills to stay sober.
You were talking about the role of a prosecutor, and it's really, you've got to take each person on their facts and try to do justice by them.
Yeah.
And what I'm most proud of is a case like yours where we were able to find a resolution for you that gave you another chance to be the person you are again. I don't think there's anything I'll ever do I'll be more proud of.
Well, I appreciate that. It means a lot to have somebody in a position like yours who really cares about the people and doesn't view somebody as just a junkie, I felt that from the first second that I met you, that you treated me like a human being, and that really made me feel good. I wouldn't even know what to do if I had no family for support. Some of my greatest successes and some of my biggest regrets involve family. I mean, forgiving myself for the stuff that I put my family through is really, really difficult. But then also regaining the trust has been a huge thing. I mean, it's crazy now to look at my life as I'm getting married in like 6 weeks, and I'll be sober at that wedding. If you'd have asked my buddies from high school if I'd be sober at my wedding 10 years ago, they'd have laughed at you.
Justin, he's walked a path that I haven't walked. He's come into federal court as a defendant. As much as I empathize with Justin, I don't know what that's like. But there are lots of Vermonters who have been charged with crimes as a result of their drug involvement who do know what it's like. Whatever stigma they feel, whatever hopelessness they feel, Justin can speak to them with a credibility that, as much as I try to understand, I don't have.
I felt at ease the second I saw you guys. I think people that achieve long-term sobriety are willing to look themselves in the mirror. And the second that I could actually embrace that and say, you know what? I have to take ownership of my own recovery. Yeah. That was the second that I really, truly started to heal.
Number again?
It's my office's number, 802-951-6725. So, we just want to now, as we've done a couple of other times in this, when we made this presentation, sort of open it up for dialogue, questions, thoughts.
Hi, I'm Liz Brattleboro. My question is, thank you. You had 9-month treatment, and that sounds like that's very unusual. Why can't there be more of that?
I don't know the answer to that.
If the other 28-day isn't effective and everybody says that,
So, I don't have a good answer for you. I think there should be more. He went to Phoenix House at a time where Phoenix House was functioning very well. It is since, in later years, it has not. There were problems at Phoenix House, so the United States Probation Office stopped contracting with it. When I say problems, people were they allowed people to leave, as I understand, and people were coming back with drugs, and that was happening too often. There was a couple of overdoses at the facility. So I think we need more long-term treatment. there is no place right now for a federal defendant who gets released to go into treatment to go that's longer than 28 days. And I, not being a lawmaker, don't exactly know how to fix that, but we need, and Medicaid, of course, there's issues with Medicaid because it only funds 28 days. And so, and I assume that's just a cost-saving measure, though I'm not a healthcare policy wonk, or a wonk on anything, really. But let me just say this about the 28 days, and you have to work with what you have, and 28 days has been the jumping off point to recovery for many, many people. There are many, many success stories, and 28 days is better than no treatment. When you're a person who needs treatment, you've never had it before, or you've had it before and we think it's time for another chance, it's much better than just jail, because jail is not an appropriate option for everybody at every stage of their case. Don't get me wrong, it's appropriate many, many times. I'm not saying it's never appropriate, but so that's, we have to work with what we have, and I'm glad we have some option, and I'm glad we have very good IOP programs, our hub and spokes model. But those are my thoughts, but now you can speak to.
Yeah, I mean, I was really lucky that I got to go to Dublin when I came out, and I think the biggest thing about that for me was that, at like 60, 75 days, the drugs were long gone and I didn't feel any better, and I kind of realized, well, the drugs aren't the problem, I'm the problem. So, but I learned a lot of skills there, and I was there for such a long time. I mean, this most recent run of sobriety, I did come out of a 28-day. So I went to Dublin 7 years ago, was out, was clean for about 2.5 years, had a relapse, went into a 28-day, came out, got involved in 12-step recovery, and I've been clean since. So oftentimes I think if I had followed the aftercare plan and I had followed the instructions of my sponsor and gotten back into my step work, I would have done well. But I also think I learned so many skills and laid the foundation at that 9-month program. I don't think I'd be alive today without it. So that's kind of all I have to say on it.
My name is Joyce Sullivan. I'm a local psychologist and drug and alcohol counselor, and so I know that we don't have those funds. I understand some of the external constrictions. However, if we could be creative and you could create a treatment, given your experience, what would you create?
I'm not a professional in the field, so I don't know. I mean, I think...
Some expertise.
I think for me, the behavioral modification stuff that I did in Dublin was very, very helpful because it showed me my problem behaviors. And that had nothing to do with, it's weird. You're there and you don't understand what's going on until you're there a couple months and you see, man, I'm always breaking the rules in regard to instant gratification. I'm always breaking the rules in regard to not, taking somebody else's perspective into account. I think that's very effective. I think some of the CBT stuff is effective.
But what kind of container would you create? Like we keep going back between IOP or 28 days or these more kind of dinosaur 90 days or even longer days. What kind of container would you think about? Because that's kind of the nuts and bolts of the treatment. But what do people need to contain in such a difficult time in their lives?
I think that all I can speak from is my experience. I needed a daily process that I could follow. And for me, I don't mind sharing it. I know I'm supposed to say 12-step, but I'm an AA person, and my sponsor showed me a daily regimen that I would do every single day. And I have done that every day for almost 4 years. And it included praying in the morning and praying at night, even if I didn't know what I was praying to, reading pages 66 and 84 to 88 in the big book every day, talking to him, doing step work, doing a daily inventory, treating people with kindness, compassion, and respect. And the process of actually working through the 12 steps, that could differ day to day, but I needed a daily process that simplified it, that I did not have any input into. I did not get to decide what I would work or not work, because when I decided what I would do and not do, I went back to doing drugs. Well, first I became restless, irritable, and discontented. Then I went back to doing drugs. And I would argue that the first part, before the drugs, being dry, is worse for me. So.
I'll just say, one quick thing is, I do think that different models work for different people, and some people work 28 days has been successful, some people 9 months. I suspect we need more long-term care like that. Some people intensive outpatient treatment on the medically assisted treatment. Some people do not. I know people who have not wanted to do and have not done medically assisted treatment and been successful at things like AA and NA. My thing is, let's take them all, and whatever works, whatever is getting people out of the slavery, of the cycle of slavery, let's do it. I mean, I'm aware that there are disagreements between the treatment communities. For me, I have no patience. It's like if we can find a way for people to have a future and a path forward and to reunite with their families and their children, and that for communities to be safer as a result, I'll take any kind of treatment you got.
You said something that caught my attention. You said that as a lawmaker, you don't really know what the answer is in regards to getting more long-term treatment.
No, I'm not a lawmaker.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. As Attorney General, you said that you didn't really know. Right, I understand.
I'm not Attorney General.
I apologize.
That'd be a promotion. I'm sorry, sir. Go ahead.
I'm going to try and get this right. I really am.
No, you're fine. You're fine. My family doesn't know what my title is.
Okay. All right. That's good. That makes me feel better. Well, the thought came to me that perhaps there is something in the way that you might be able to do to help. Especially across this country, there's a big problem with the criminalization of homelessness here. And it has a lot to do with drug addiction. Vermont is kind of on the front lines of solving this problem. There's been many states in the country who have adopted a homeless Bill of Rights, which addresses some of this issue with the drug addiction. Vermont currently has this bill before the House, I believe, at the moment. I believe that's where it's at. Or maybe it's just in committee at the moment. I'm not sure. But if we could, it seems to me that if that could be moved forward a little bit, and we could change the attitude of people towards some of this, that perhaps there would be some incentive to have some more long-term care. Because I'm afraid that the attitude really is a bit of a problem with a lot of people, even here in Vermont. People think that these people need to just, pull themselves up by their own bootstraps, and many of us know that that's not going to happen. There needs to be some more help.
Housing is part of the, I'll just, to come straight to one point, I don't get involved in politics. I haven't read the bill, but I don't take political positions, because as U.S. Attorney, it's so important that I enforce the law impartially, without regard to politics, and without regard to any other impermissible consideration. But I can tell you that one of the key components to making headway in this crisis is housing and recovery housing. There's not much recovery housing in the state, and so that's why we have people with substance use disorder who are homeless. And so I can't remember exactly the number of units, but it's a startlingly few number of units, and it's for people with all kinds of addiction, alcohol, cocaine, you name it. So it's not even just for opioids or crack cocaine. So I agree that that's a huge part of the problem. I agree if you have nowhere to live, that makes it very hard for your story to end this way. And I think that's the best I can speak to your point. Do you want to add to that? No.
Hello, my name is Carol, and first of all, I just want to stand up and just congratulate you. We really do need to focus on the positive and people like yourself. I don't know if you ever heard of Richie Weber. He is fairly new, and he does basically the same thing. There has been recently a huge focus on videos like this of success stories, and you spoke about children, getting the message across. We're beyond, this is your brain on drugs. This is about people talking to children and saying, this is what's going to happen to you. And it's done in many different forms, and I heard recently that Trump is going to do something for that as well. But I just want to commend you for not only following through and being held accountable, holding yourself accountable, but being able to stand up there, because I questioned the date. You know, there was some dates, and I'm like, okay, 3 years, what happened? And you say, oh, well, I relapsed. Yeah, you hit a bump in the road. We all have concerns about the revolving door. There are so many. The funding has been cut. I've worked in that field. I know it's heartbreaking when we see somebody go into the retreat, or any place, I shouldn't just say, they go in, and because of lack of insurance or lack of places, there's no place for them to go. And if that person has no support on the outside, it doesn't matter. At some point, well, it does, because there are a very small percentage that will say, to think to themselves, they'll grab a hold, and they'll go to more than 90, they'll go to 180 meetings, or, you know, they go beyond, they have a strong peer support, and they can be successful. There are people that will go to Starting Now locally. There are people that will just, you know, what is the AA? You said you go to AA. You have to be willing to go to any, right? Any lens. And you are standing up there sharing your experience, strength, and hope. And we need more people to step up to the plate and say, as I will say, I am a person in recovery, okay? There are bumps in the road that we will face, and we may relapse. But the important thing is we need to eliminate the shame, the stigma, and say it's okay, come on back. No, you didn't lose that time. You still have all that time. And you know, we could go on and on and on about, and believe me, I could ask my friends, about all the different problems and obstacles, variables that make it up. But the one thing that I want to focus on tonight is hope. And I always say, for as long as there's breath, there's hope. That's right. So I really commend, you know, the program with knock-on, you know, people coming, but they say, why should we bring them back? Because as long as there's breath, there's hope. And again, I commend you, and you know, it's just, this is a wonderful story. And I get mushy, so if you want to say anything, please do.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, with a lot of people, and I've done a bunch of these now. I did some last weekend. I spoke to 2 college football teams. It was just incredible. But some people can't, you know, afford to come out, you know, and lose their anonymity, and I have, and I don't think my story is incredible. I really don't. I've met some people with just that overcame many more odds than I did. I just know that I was smart enough to get out of my own way. And you know, things never worked for me. I never got clean. I never got sober. Even when I was abstinent, I was never happy until I got involved in doing the work in that daily process that I talked about. And you know, I thank you so much for your kind words.
Yeah, what I wanted to say is, once again, thanks to the police officers, the first responders, all of you, because this is what needs to happen. I've had friends that have spent 10 years in jail. Some of my best friends have been caught with 52 bags of heroin, and this was in the state of Massachusetts. Begged for help at a treatment center, and you can't even get in. And I have spent money, hours trying to help people, but it comes right down to a trauma. I overcame childhood trauma. It took me 40 years to recognize it. One of my best friends, I feel so bad for her, but thank God she's incarcerated or she'd be dead. She was hooked on heroin. She was molested at 12, raped again at like 21. Until she deals with the trauma and has true friends, you don't get ahead. So I'm just saying, I appreciate law enforcement and you guys to be true friends to a human being rather than use them.
You're right. Trauma is, so addiction is so often accompanied by co-occurring problems like mental health problems and people suffering from trauma and poverty and so many other issues. And you're right that is often the way life starts, is with trauma with individuals who go on to have addiction. So we need to find a way to deal with the complete picture. One of the individuals who reached out to me after her case, and who I've had some relationship with, had extreme trauma in her life and extreme mental health, severe mental health issues that were addressed in a long-term facility that we no longer have access to. So I think you're spot on, and thank you for your words. Really appreciate it. I'm here to serve someone like you, and I try to think about that every hour of every day.
The Attorney General of Oklahoma just sued Johnson & Johnson for $500 million. Now, I think if the state went in that direction, you can implement all the programs you actually need.
So, I agree, and there's multi-district litigation going on. Number of states' attorney generals have sued Purdue Pharma for their disgusting, egregious role in this opioid crisis. No question, they have blood on their hands when it comes to the opioid crisis, and so there are people thinking that way, and the state of Vermont is involved in that suit, and that's all I can say. That's all I'll say for comment. But that is, people in law enforcement are thinking like you. You want to say anything about the farm? You started with the bills.
Well, I mean, I think that was, I've met maybe even thousands of people that, in 2009, when the formula changed, I think it was 2009 or 2010, that was when, I don't know what the numbers are, but I know I went to heroin. I went to go pick up some oxys, and they weren't there anymore. And they had these addiction-proof ones that would kind of gel up on you. And I think there was just this mass of people that went to heroin at that point, out of what we all thought was necessity. It's easy for people to kind of judge on the outside. I've met people along the way that, why don't you just stop? You can stop if you want to. But when that with opiate withdrawal kicks in, it is just, it made me do some things I never thought I would do. So, am I angry at Purdue Pharmaceuticals? I don't know. I do think they consciously did things to get rich, but, I stopped fighting battles like that a long time ago.
We'll deal with that.
I gotta focus on myself, and it doesn't do me any good to hold resentments toward them, because at the end of the day, if I'd have gotten involved in recovery around that time, I probably would be sober 10 years now. So.
And it's not just Purdue. There's a lot of pharmaceutical companies that marketed opioids, and I think as citizens, I think everybody, all citizens, as to all these pharmaceutical companies, have a right to ask these questions and have the feelings you're having, and I'm saying that as a citizen. So. There's got to be other comments or thoughts.
Justin Johnston. I'm a person in long-term recovery from opiates. Thank you so much for being here and your story. It's inspiring, and I agree. We need to hear more stories like this. The community does. I also hear a lot of empathy and compassion in this room right now. That is definitely something that's builds on the barriers and stigmatizing, situations that we often face in the community, and I think there's just so many. Everybody has such a valid point, and there's no right answer. And I appreciate what you say, Christina Nolan. I believe you prosecuted my case. I can't remember because I was detoxing so bad.
I remember you. You look great.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Yeah.
Thank you for being here.
Where was I at with that again? I forget. But what's important, is that there's no right answer in all pathways, and what you're saying is I'll take them all. I'll take every treatment. Like, it's so awesome hearing that, because it's just a valid point. My AA is what saved this Justin, and not AA is what saved this Justin. But at the end of the day, it works, and our program worked for us, and that's what's important. And just thank you guys for being here and doing this event.
Thanks, Justin. And I guess when we start highlighting success stories, we'll just look for everyone named Justin.
Oh, it means a lot to hear you say that. I mean, I feel odd standing up here because you could just as easily be standing up here, and you know, I appreciate your kind words. Thank you.
I have a question. So, Carol, again, I've heard you say this before. I've been to several of these forums, and there's talk about if a person relapses or a person is on probation and they start using, they're not supposed to, so they can get in trouble with their probation officer. There are people that actually say, bogus. If I go to them and tell them I'm using and I need help, I'm going to get in trouble.
I can answer that question.
I would appreciate that, because I do not want to promote that if that's not really the truth.
I can answer that question. I was lucky enough to be supervised here in Brattleboro. Now I live in Keene. After my relapse, you know, about 4 years ago, I had to drive to Brattleboro from Keene, and you know, I'm a small business owner. I drove to Brattleboro 65 times in 1 year to take random UAs. I was supervised by a guy here, I won't say his name, but he was the most wonderful, caring, invested human being I've ever met, and I thank him just as fiercely as I thank Christina. I honestly believe that with federal probation and parole, all they want you to do is tell them the truth. When I told him the truth and asked for help, he gave it to me. He cared about what was going on with me. And you know, he said this to me early on. I often refer to him as the robot because he's very matter of fact and serious, but we learned to kind of laugh and bond over some things. He said, you can view me as the enemy or you can view me as an asset. And the second I viewed him as an asset, the guy helped me more than I can even say. Relapsed, told him the truth, relapsed again, let me go to treatment. You know, and I honestly believe that they just want people to tell them the truth. And if you're honest with them, I can't speak to everybody. In my experience, they will allow you to get help.
And they will actually pave a way for that to happen.
Oh yeah.
You got a better chance of getting the treatment. So
yeah. And early on, when you're supervised, the vets take care of. They took care of a lot of stuff with me.
Great.
So.
I will say that I just echo that. I've worked closely with U.S. probation for years. I don't have intimate familiarity with the state criminal system or their parole officers, but the U.S. probation officers are total pros, and they know that if you're not telling the truth, you're not even close. That's when you need to be violated. If you come tell them the truth, not everyone gets violated for every infraction, but they know when you're in a place where you're not even close to accepting responsibility for the error, or even close to it, when you can't even acknowledge what's happening, you can't be supervised. There's nothing more they can do for you. So totally agree, and they are total pros, and they really are, they just like what I've been saying, they want people to succeed. And they know that accountability when it's time is part of that, but they also know that you don't have to pull the trigger on every mistake if somebody's being open with you and asking for help.
Nice.
Somebody raise their hand in back.
Hi. So as Justin mentioned, there's a lot of empathy in this room. Do you have any tips of what we as members of the community can do? What can we do to support people?
You know, just treat people with kindness and compassion, understand the difference between helping and enabling. I think, my story, my mother is a saint. And when I say she's a saint, she has said the F word once in her life. Because a woman was dying and asked her to say it on her deathbed. She is a saint. But there were years and years of just enabling that went on. And I wish that, I don't blame her because she loved me and thought she was helping me. But to understand the difference between helping and enabling, and just to understand that I deal with a lot of different people in my business. And I often have this conversation with this one client of mine that I would like to headbutt on a weekly basis. That was a joke. But he says to me all the time, he says, you could have just stopped. And I said, I got an experiment we're going to run. I'm going to shoot you up with heroin for 30 days. And then on that 31st day, when you come to get shot up, I'm going to tell you I ran out. And then you'll know what it's like. So it's great for people to have empathy, but it's hard when you haven't been in that position. But just to treat people with kindness and compassion. I often say this, when people say you lose control and your life becomes unmanageable, people that know me, I was an all-state athlete. I was an Ivy League kid coming out of school. Nobody would make the decisions that I made at the peak of my professional career if they weren't in control. Nobody. So when people have that attitude saying you can stop and you can do it whenever you can, they just don't get it. When you're that deep into addiction, you are no longer running the show. So to have compassion and acceptance for that, but also not to go so far and enable. That's what I think.
I totally agree. And I'll just add one thing to that, which is I'll just say, we're all in this together. You hardly meet anyone in Vermont these days who doesn't know somebody who's struggling with addiction or hasn't dealt with it themselves. I do. I can raise my hand about knowing, having those people in my life. And we need to be able to talk about it. The shame and stigma is a real problem. It's like I have so many problems, so many problems. We all have problems. I mean, I could talk for another hour about the challenges I face. And and I probably would just talk about them. But for some reason, with drug addiction, we have a hard time opening up about it. And it's not just the people who are addicted, it's the families too, I think. And I think we just need to realize that this is touching everybody. Even if you don't know somebody, it's touching your life in some way, I guarantee it. And the more we can open up and talk about it and lean on each other, I think that will foster an environment where more people are willing to come forward and ask for help.
Hi, my name is Gershom, just local in the community. Just kind of curious, how would I interact with some of my community members just to try to help them just get through the minute, the hour, the day? Like I don't believe I've had a struggle with addiction. I've partied in my life, but I don't think I've had a struggle with addiction. I've had plenty of family members, but in the past year that I've been out and around, I've been just seeing the struggle with everyone. And the biggest thing that I've been seeing is like the us and them complex, and I don't like it because half the people out in town are my friends, the homeless people, some of the addicts, I just found out about a buddy of mine that like had a mishap yesterday, and he came around and we were just talking, and the only thing I could really say was try to stay up, try to keep your light up, try to follow your light. But how do I actually engage with them, other than like just give them a simple hug and be like, it's gotta be okay. Like,
That's a great question. I mean, and there's a lot of different answers I can give you. I mean, I can remember redoing the same clean dishes just to get through the minute, In sobriety, people say, one day at a time. I took it 1 second at a time. I will go out on a limb because I'm open with everything. I'm still Medicaid assisted. I'm on the Sublocade shot. So I am a big fan of Medicaid assisted treatment. I wasn't always. I was raised old school AA and we viewed it as cheating. And I do not have that opinion now. I believe that for people that have opioid issues, The medicated assisted treatment keeps the physical part of the addiction at bay while we work on the mental, emotional, and spiritual. So I believe that's an answer for some people, but sometimes it's saying the Serenity Prayer over and over again, taking a walk, doing some exercise, anything to occupy the mind. But to be honest, in the moment, that withdrawal is so severe. There was nothing I could ever do to curb it. There were no amount of dishes I could do. There was no amount of weights I could lift. There was no amount of distance I could walk. And you know, I just believe now with some of the things that they have out there, some of the medicated assisted stuff, if you could, you know, have information to tell people where to go, if there's a clinic, if there's, you know, a place they could go around here, I think that's a good option for a lot of people, because the success rates of people that are using that piece of treatment, and we're talking about using every piece of treatment, I believe they're a heck of a lot higher than the people that aren't. So.
Yeah, the thing I would actually recommend to everybody is find a good counselor. I mean, I laugh, but I used to think they were nuts. But you need to work on the medical thing from the shoulders up. I've gone to counseling off and on for 15 years, and I drop in once a month, may drop in every 2 months or on call, but I can recognize my trigger points with my own post-traumatic stress disorder. And it's been a life changer to work through trauma that I kept quiet for 40 years. And I took out sports as a way to get rid of the anger, you know, from a boxing champ to a football champ. And then I says, I don't have any more anger because I talked it out.
Another question, there's not anything else.
I've been trying to poke through an explanation for the last 3 years to understand what's going on in Brattleboro. And I don't know if this is accurate, but I've come up with a rough sketch that basically all the problems go back to trauma, and the trauma is from childhood, and the trauma is coming from family structure. And if that's accurate, then that means that in order to deal with this situation, we have to examine our family structure. But when my generation took over in the late 60s and early 70s, in terms of parenting, we overreacted a little bit to the, quote, repressiveness of the 50s, and we introduced free-range parenting. No boundaries, no restrictions to varying degrees on children. And to send children out in this very complicated world without a roadmap, it just doesn't work. And then we are sending them out without structure and tools to deal with life. And then a touchy one, a specific point. I'm not sure that people recognize one trauma that is so prevalent that my generation made socially acceptable, and that is divorce.
I take it that you're a father. I mean, it sounds like it, and I really appreciate your reflections. And appreciate how much thought you put into them. You know, my parents were divorced, and it was hard for us. It was really hard. 4 kids, and then my mom raised the 4 of us, and we didn't see my dad as much, and you know, it changed my world. I think I was 12, 13 years old when it happened. So I agree that early childhood trauma and childhood trauma can be, that you may be more likely to fall into drug use if you've had that in your childhood. You know, I did not raise kids in the 60s and 70s. I was born in 1979, so I don't have the same perspective you have, but I appreciate your thoughtfulness, and I do think that how you're raised and the experiences you have as a child are going to inform what happens to you later on. And so we need to start with kids. I mean, that's the reason we're here. is to get a message to young people. I mean, message to everybody, but we're going to be going into school soon, and they really want to get to kids on this message.
My point is that the message needs to go to families.
Agreed.
That the families have to look at what's going on.
I agree, and that's why I think families can't be in denial about kids who are using. I say this is part of the shame and looking away and wanting it not to exist. I think a lot of that is going on. Can't be happening in my house. You know, not my backyard, not my wonderful child. And I think we need to start facing that it's happening in every kind of household. Every kind of household. Divorced or not divorced. White collar, blue collar, middle class and low class and everything in between. Lower class and everything in between. It's happening in all households. And I think we need to face it, like we do so many other problems in our households. We are not just talking to children. I mean, I take it there are parents in the room tonight. And we've already spoken to at least 2 adult audiences, and we're taking this anywhere anyone will listen. I'll go anywhere in the state, anytime, anywhere, any age group, anybody who will listen.
You covered that.
I'm going to sign you up. This could be a whole nother topic. I would like to ask you, and I totally agree with what you're saying, that there's so many variables. We do have people that use and abuse that had a wonderful childhood.
Yep.
But they have something happen, they got into an accident, whatever, and next thing they know, they're hooked. So I know, but my question to you, first of all, you spoke of, like, I'm familiar with Suboxone, methadone, and all that. What is this? That's part of my question. What is this thing that you take?
Sublocade is
it fairly new?
Yes. Yeah, I've been 5 months. I was subcutaneous Suboxone out of my last relapse. 16 milligrams for a year, 12 milligrams for quite a while. And 5 months ago, I have a subcutaneous shot that disperses 4 milligrams of buprenorphine a day and 2 milligrams of naltrexone a day, so I'm not taking something every day.
Nice. And it's also something that would make you feel sick if you were to use, or?
No, it would block.
That's right.
The naltrexone would block an opioid.
I got it. So if you use, you're not even going to get stoned.
To me, it wouldn't matter. I'd eat Lay's all day if I could get high off them. So it's not just the opioids I got to worry about.
Okay. So finally, and we may not have time to cover this, what are your thoughts on safe injection sites?
That's it. I think that it may have worked in Switzerland and Poland, but this is the United States of America. I kind of feel like it's giving up, but at the same time...
What about as long as there's breath, there's hope?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, that's a tough question. I've heard some compelling arguments for it. I feel like it would kind of be like giving up. That's just my personal.
So I'm on the record as being quite opposed to this idea, and so you asked a heck of a question for a last question. So I've done a lot of thinking about this, and most of the studies. Well, let me back up. They're against the law. It's against the law to use heroin or fentanyl or opioids, and it's against the law to maintain a premises for the purpose of drug use. We charge that crime all the time. It's a 10-year felony. We charge it down here in Brattleboro. People who are maintaining a premises for the purpose of drug use, that's not legal, and it's not going to be any more legal if you call yourself an injection site. I don't like to call them safe because I don't believe they're safe. Here's the other thing. It will attract dealers to the area of the facility. You can use any kind of drug you want in there: methamphetamine, crack cocaine, fentanyl, carfentanil, every type of fentanyl analog. Naloxone does not reverse overdose from methamphetamine, and it doesn't always apparently reverse overdose from some of the very powerful fentanyl analogs because you can re-overdose after it's administered. So somebody died up in Canada in one of these facilities not long ago. Then I've actually visited one in Montreal, so I could be as informed as possible. Then you come in, they rush you into the room to be injected, then they rush you out. Now, I don't think we want people from Derby, Vermont, getting in a car on fentanyl after they use an injection facility. But more than that, the research does not show that they save lives. It does not show that. In the research comes from Vancouver, most of it. Vancouver's injection, in the area of Vancouver where the injection facility is, has become hell to live in. Total hell. And it's drawn police to the area when they should be, when they need to be available everywhere. There is no indication that people, even in the area of the site, use it for even any significant percentage of their injections. The studies, such as they are authored by the people who got the money from the government to open the facility. They're authored by the people who need to show success in order for this facility to stay open. So in my world, that's not going to be a neutral evaluation. Here's the thing that I think we need to do. We need to have supply reduction. That's my office arresting people and bringing them consequences. And that stems the flow of drugs into our community, these deadly drugs. But we also need demand reduction. We need people to get into treatment. We need to get them on medically assisted treatment or whatever kind of treatment works for them, and we need to convince people not to use. I think it's completely counterproductive for the government to say, when we're trying to achieve those goals, no, we'll give you a place to use, including young people, and we're going to send you on your way. There's no evidence that these facilities get people into treatment. And then the people who are in treatment and are actually having some success are going to see the government opening a place to inject. And I just think that we're going, and then of course the dealers will come to the area and make money off the people who are using. So to me, it's totally anathema to everything we're trying to do. And it is most important, it is the height of cynicism, it is the height of giving up. And I'm a hopeful person, and I think we can get people, we got to focus on getting people into drug-free lives, not perpetuating this cycle of torture and slavery.
Thank you.
That was a big question. Big question. Okay, so should we wrap up?
Yep.
Okay, thank you all for coming.
Thank you.